My name is Dr. Eric Norton, and I have worked as an outside consultant for the NSA and NASA for going on 12 years now. My security clearance at present warrants my need to take the appropriate steps to keep myself protected the best I can. One of those steps is not to give too much information about myself. What I can tell you is that I have worked as an outside consultant on many projects led by our government, the U.S. government, including with, more recently, the Meteoroid Environment Office, or MEO, which is involved in several research projects with installations located throughout North America. The underlying goal of these projects is to gain a better understanding of the meteoroid environment so that the MEO environment models can be improved. We basically monitor the skies, track meteors and other objects in space, and to date have made some very interesting observations, to say the least. Some very chilling observations, in fact. Observations that, if revealed to the public, would not only change the game forever, and we're not just talking the breakdown of all religions and a total overhaul of everything we've ever known about the universe and space, but we are talking the breakdown of society itself. We are talking about a subject matter that, even up until today, carries with it a level of disbelief amongst the majority of the worldwide community. On January 22nd, 2012, I was called to the McDonald Observatory in Texas, which happens to be the second largest optical telescope in the continental U.S. I received a phone call from an associate with the observatory and was booked that night on a flight out to Texas, where I was met by an agent reporting to be with Homeland Security. He didn't say anything to me other than that he had been dispatched to see that I had reached the observatory and reviewed the information within that was awaiting me. Now, when I arrived at the McDonald Observatory, I was met by a second man with Homeland Security, and by this time I was really dumbfounded as to what was going on as it pertained to me. I had never dealt with matters of national security, so I was really lost as to what it was that could be so urgent that it warranted this almost security guard-like behavior from these two agents. I was quickly shuffled back into the main observatory chamber, where I met four other gentlemen who were involved with the operations of the observatory. And what they showed me was of such a shock to even my belief system that, once confirmed, I had to sit down and take a moment to get a hold of myself. What I saw, I can best explain in my own words as an array of massive three-dimensional black structures in space, in straight line formation, advancing in the direction of planet Earth. I know this because I was shown images taken 3 months prior which depicted the very obvious course of direction by these things, which had moved millions upon millions of miles closer within just months. I'll let you do the math in terms of how fast these things were moving. Now, I was there with the understanding that it was my job to aid in gauging exactly what type of composition these objects were made up of, and whether they were man-made, natural, or unnatural to anything seen before it. Now, using the scientific instruments provided by NASA that are available to us today, we were able to discern the fact that these were not naturally occurring materials, and that they were, to our best but limited understanding, some sort of metallic, carbon-reinforced material, several thousand times the structural hardness of what we have today, whether it be natural occurring diamonds or carbon nanotube type material. The objects seemed to also be emitting some sort of force field that deflected space particles from touching their surface, almost like the magnetic field around the Earth, which shields it from the sun's rays and solar material. The objects were getting so close that with our telescopes we could see the structural features of these things in high detail. They were shaped in the best way I can describe as a three-dimensional L-shaped craft. I use the word craft loosely, as we do not know if these things are piloted or vehicles at all in the strictest sense. All we knew is that they were moving, and moving fast. By January 2013, the objects had been tracked to about 200,000 miles past the planet Mars. Once they reached this point, almost instantaneously the objects vanished from our telescope lenses. I mean, completely vanished, and as if they had activated some sort of invisibility shield at the flick of a switch. That's the best way I can describe it. We couldn't see them on any form of radar we have or any other visual medium available. We were left scratching our heads, and by this time, I knew that the upper echelons of the U.S. government were worried about these things because I was under a constant 24/7 guard by Secret Service agents who kept a close eye on me every single day since late 2012. I did not go home, go to the grocery store, or wake up in the morning without the reality of knowing that I was being watched. Some very powerful, high-up people were keeping an eye on me and the work that we were doing regarding these objects. Although I was never told about this, it was obvious with what I saw going on around me and the personnel involved. So for nearly the entire year of 2013, we watched the skies in disbelief of what had occurred. We didn't know what was going on or where these things were. According to my calculations, these things would have been so close to us by now that we would have no problem seeing them in the night sky had they stayed visible to us. But as I said, we didn't know whether they were still coming in their recorded direction or if they had simply left the solar system altogether. We just didn't know enough to gauge what was going on and what these things were really here for. I was sent home awaiting orders to continue my work if needed, and for some 6 months I did not hear so much a phone call regarding the situation. It wasn't until all of this commotion regarding the government shutdown, particularly of all the space surveillance projects, that I made some calls to see what was going on. Sure enough, what I had feared the most had been confirmed after I contacted a close friend whom I had worked with confidentially on this project at the McDonald Observatory. I asked him what was going on, and was there something to all of these space monitoring programs being shut down, including NASA, and was there cause to worry? My colleague sounded extremely unnerved when I spoke with him. At one point it was almost as if he was trembling in his speaking, and I asked him, what is going on here? It was then that he told me that the objects had reappeared and had positioned themselves behind the moon. The blackout of all space monitoring programs was essential to keeping the lid on what had happened. I did not speak with my colleague long due to the fact that he was not supposed to be speaking with anyone and was risking even his own life even calling me back. But what I do know is that these objects reappeared sometime earlier this month and positioned themselves in a circular type alignment, which allowed them to dock to the backside of the moon, or just above the backside of the moon, so as to remain virtually invisible to sky watchers. The things are up there, and they're just beyond our view of sight when we look up at the moon. We don't know what they are, what they're doing, or what they're going to do. We do know that there have already been fluctuations in Earth's gravity field and the gravity field which links the moon to the Earth. These things are stationary, and they are at this very moment sitting behind the moon. No movement, no radio signals, no nothing. We are at a standstill as to what will happen next, or if these things will suddenly reveal themselves. It also calls into question just what it is we think about the moon, and is there a reason these things chose the moon to begin with to migrate to? You also take into account the recent ballistic Topol mission launch led by Russia, which was witnessed from space by Italian astronaut Luca Parmitano after having seen a strange afterglow above the Earth which looked like a missile contrail. The thing that is strange about this is that the Topol missile uses solid fuel as propellant, so it cannot have been the dump that the astronauts saw. I'm not sure now what caused the cloud, but it's clearly associated with the missile itself. Now couple that with the recent shutdown of NASA and the furlough of 98% of its employees and the shutdown of the International Space Station's live feed, and I think you can start to get the picture. They're definitely hiding something, and I've done my best to describe what that is here today.